guys, it's Cameron review for Dark Phoenix. And what Dark Phoenix is essentially about is after the events of X-Men Apocalypse, basically, the X-Men have basically become full-on superheroes. They are now helping out the world. People are really depending on them and, like, space missions and things like that. And it really seems like things are going in a good direction for them. However, after one mission goes kind of awire, we start to see that Jean Grey starts to exhibit this sort of rage in her that almost leaves her near dead, but she actually does survive. And after coming out of this mission, she starts to show signs that are a lot more erratic. She seems to have this darker power growing inside of her, and the X-Men have to do what they can to try to get her to harness it and try to control it as best as they can, and just try to figure out what to really do in this situation. And I gotta be honest, I was not really looking forward to this film. Look, I'm a fan of X-Men. I really have liked the movies I've seen. I actually rewatched all of the films, well, at least in the First Class trilogy thus far. First Class, I've said it many times, that is a film that has really gotten me into superhero films. I think that is such a great way to start off the series. Days of Future Past, I think, is really where the series hit its peak, though. In terms of the X-Men films, of course, we have Logan and things like that, but in terms of the team-up films, that's where this series hit its peak for me. I mean, that was everything that I could have wanted. It actually concluded things quite well, and if that would have been the ending to the series, I honestly would have been fine with that. But then we had Apocalypse, and honestly, on a rewatch, I was not as big of a fan of it. I feel like it definitely had some really great ideas, but it very much felt like two different movies. There was way too much going on, and it just was really messy overall, and especially after rewatching it, you can imagine why I wasn't really looking forward to Dark Phoenix very much at all. This film, you know, with all the, you know, negative buzz surrounding it, the reshoots, the terrible reviews we were hearing, I mean, I expected this to be a huge train wreck, knowing it was going to be the final X-Men film. I really was not expecting much of anything from this, and I have to say, this film is not good. I will definitely say that, but it is not the train wreck that I was expecting. Dark Phoenix is not a terrible film. It's not a good film, but it's definitely better than you are expecting it to be. At least for me. It's better for me than I expect it to be, and that's definitely something that I will give it. But let's just get into right now, starting off with the cast. And going into this film, that was definitely a worry of mine, considering that this film is the final film, you know, in the Fox X-Men umbrella sort of thing. You know, a lot of these actors, you kind of felt like maybe they weren't really going to care, but I have to say, there was a lot more care put into the acting than I was really expecting, especially when it comes to Sophie Turner, who I really was not a fan of in X-Men Apocalypse. I thought she was fairly bland and robotic, but here, they gave her a lot more to do, and I was overall very impressed by her. As when the movie started, yes, she definitely had that robotic tone, but once she starts to channel that darkness more, and once she starts to feel conflicted over, you know, what she really wants to do, I thought she got really good. I thought she definitely had some really great scenes here. I honestly did think she heightened a lot of the story that was surrounding her, and I overall was very impressed by her. It's by no means an amazing performance, but it did show that I do think Sophie Turner can carry a movie. I very much do think it's possible for her to do that, and I do hope she continues to get roles within her future, because I do think she's a very talented actress, and this film very much does show the capability that she does have in her. Now, the rest of the cast, I mean, you guys are expecting me to say that James McAvoy is really great and Michael Fassbender is great, but I have to say, I mean, even in a film like this, where they knew that it was going to be the last one, you would think that maybe they wouldn't care, but no, McAvoy and Fassbender, they still give it their all. They still have some fantastic scenes throughout this entire film. McAvoy especially, I thought, stood out here. I thought he had maybe some of his best work to date within this film, and I was very impressed by him. You know, Xavier and, you know, Jean Grey, they share a very deep connection, and McAvoy really did stand out in those scenes, and I thought he had some really great stuff to do here that I very much enjoyed. Nicholas Hoult, I thought also maybe gave his best performance that he's ever given in this franchise, and I was very impressed by him here. They went in a direction with this character that I really wasn't expecting, and I really liked that. You know, other characters like, say, Evan Peters, I mean, he's always really great, and he definitely did a very good job. Sheridan was very 50-50 for me. There were times where I thought he was good, but then there were times where I thought he was really overacting and kind of cheesy, and I just didn't really like him all that much. Alexandra Shipp, I thought, was pretty good, and Believe it or not, I know this is going to be shocking. Jennifer Lawrence did actually care in this movie. She's not on autopilot like she was in Apocalypse, where it didn't really seem like she cared, and she just kind of read every line like this, and she just didn't really seem like she was into it. No, it actually seemed like she did put an ounce of care into it. I'm not going to say it's like an amazing performance, because definitely she's shown better before, but compared to Apocalypse, this is much better. It definitely did seem like she cared, and I will definitely give her that for sure. And Jessica Chastain, she definitely does do a good job here. Really, the entire cast in terms of acting, I really didn't think anyone was all that bad here. I thought for the most part everyone worked really well together. I did think that the acting did elevate this film overall, and I was impressed by the cast. And again, I have to give it to them, even in a film that isn't really that great narratively, they still really do a great job. They still really do give it their all here, and I was very impressed by the cast here because of that. So now let's get to the directing and the writing, and this is where we get to definitely the more problematic issues with the film. Now, Simon Kinberg, I know that he's written for X-Men before. Obviously, he wrote Days of Future Past, and he did such a great job with that screenplay, but I've said it before, just because you're a great writer, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be as good as a director. We've seen this happen many times before. Obviously, recently, we've seen this trend where, like, actors are trying to become directors and things like that, but it doesn't always work, and I think that's really what happened here. Kinberg's style, there just isn't much of one. It feels very bland. It feels like it's missing something, and look, he definitely had the right tone. This movie is significantly darker than any other film in the First Class, series that we've seen so far. There's definitely a palpable sense of darkness that really does loom over the entire film, and they did a very good job with that for sure, but it also comes off particularly bland. I didn't really think he stuck out that much as a director. Kind of just felt like, they knew he wrote for this franchise before, so he directed, and it seemed like he was a bit overwhelmed. I didn't really see much style from him here, and I just didn't think his directing was really all that great. It wasn't bad or anything, but I just did not think that his directing really stuck out that much. His writing, on the other hand, I actually was a little bit more impressed with, although I don't think this is up to snuff with other screenplays he's done for X-Men films. However, much of this is an improvement over X-Men Apocalypse. The one thing I can definitely give this film is that it is a much more consistent story. Apocalypse felt like it was veering off into like 3 or 4 different stories. It was a bunch of different films put together, and it just didn't really work. This is much more straightforward. It is one story, and they do a very good job with that, and that's something I definitely will give Kinberg for sure. And something else I did appreciate about his writing is that this is much more of a character-driven film than you would expect. There's actually not a ton of action. There is action in this movie, but a lot of it is the character interactions, and that's why we love these X-Men films. We want to see action, but really we want to see those character interactions. We want to see those complex sort of character arcs, and he definitely did a good job with that for sure. The story that we have with Jean Grey, it definitely is a complicated sort of thing that they're going through, because this is someone they care about, but at the same time, she is starting to become a harm. She is starting to become someone that could ruin the reputation that they really have developed. They're in the good graces with the public right now, and Jean Grey is a legitimate threat to that. Also, she seems to be, very dangerous. She seems to be someone that is kind of a ticking time bomb. And I thought in that regard, they actually did a good job with that. I thought that when it comes to characters interacting, I was overall very impressed by it. And I have to say, for the first act of the movie, I actually thought it was pretty solid. I was like, wow, is this actually going to be a good movie? Is this actually going to surprise me? Like, there were some legitimately really good scenes, particularly anything involving Jean Grey and Professor X. They actually do a good job of establishing that these two have had this sort of relationship since her childhood, pretty much. Charles has been there for her. We do tap more into her backstory, and I thought they handled that pretty well, and I definitely was impressed by that, and especially considering that Jean Grey, I really don't think had anything to do, at least this iteration of her. I'm not saying Famke Jensen, I'm talking about this iteration of Jean Grey, has not really had that much to do in the series prior to now. I do think they did a good job in trying to give her a little bit more, and trying trying to get us to care more about her as a character. So when she starts to lash out, when she starts to channel this darkness more, you do give a shit. You are a little bit more into it. It feels like there is a reasoning behind it, and that was something that I was overall impressed with here. That being said, I also think this works against the film, because while they do a good job of really setting up this story and showing, Jean Grey's, past and things like that, it feels very, very surface level. A lot of the deeper complexities, they're just not really that well explored here, especially when it comes to Charles. He has this whole thing that happened with Jean that I'm not going to get into, but they explore this idea that what Charles has been doing has had a direct effect on why Jean is acting out. He takes a lot of the blame for it, and he starts to wonder if he has been failing his students. And this is a very compelling idea, this idea that what he has been doing has actually been affecting them in a negative way rather than a positive one. The problem is we just don't dive into it that deep. And the same when it goes for Jean. Because of the fact we've only had 2 films for her, there's only so much they can do to really get us attached to this and really understand why she would act out this way. And that was also a problem for me. I just don't think they've done enough to warrant this film. I really don't. I felt that going in, and I still very much feel that same way coming out. I understand that, they wanted to do this story, but I feel like they should have planted the seeds more. I really do feel like we needed another film in order for this to feel warranted, in order for this to feel like it mattered, because yes, yes, it definitely is a different direction that they're going in. Yes, it definitely is a very popular story. I understand that. And yes, for the character of Jean, it's some really great stuff, but again, they just have not done enough with her character-wise to fully warrant it, and that definitely does hurt the film for sure. And Jean's rage also doesn't really feel all that dived into. In fact, after a while, it does feel a bit tiring. It feels less like, and you understand, why she feels the way she does. It's not like you don't. It's just, they don't dive into it that much. Similar to, again, other things I've talked about. They just don't dive into it enough. And it's not really this film's fault. It's that they didn't have another film to fully dive into it. And I think if they did, then I would have felt more here. And I just unfortunately didn't. But again, a lot of the character interactions I very much do enjoy. They do a good job, I think, of connecting back to First Class and showing where a lot of these characters have come, especially when it comes to Beast and Mystique. They do a good job with showing who they were versus who they are now, and that's something I was overall very impressed with. And I am happy to say that they actually did a good job, I think, of factoring in Magneto. This is not just Charles versus Magneto and them going back and forth. We do see that, but Magneto does have a purpose in here that is far better than what I would have expected, and I did think they did a good job with that overall, so that's something I was definitely impressed with. So yeah, that stuff I think is really good. There definitely is some good character interactions in there, but still the movie has a lot of similar problems that Apocalypse does. It's not as bad as Apocalypse for sure, but there definitely are still some significant problems. One of them being that we come out, and once again, there has been this huge time jump. There's been 10 years that have gone by, and because of that, a lot of the developments in this film, we just don't feel that attached to. There's a romance especially that they're trying to get me to care about, and they really want to get you to latch onto it, and I just couldn't, because we don't really get to see, we haven't seen the growth. We haven't gotten to see the development of this romance, so it just kind of feels like it's come out of nowhere. I understand canonically that it's supposed to happen. Trust me, I get that. But I just, again, similar to Jean Grey, I don't feel like they've planted the seeds for this relationship, so it just feels jarring. It just feels like it's coming out of nowhere, and there are quite a few developments in this movie that are like that. That's a problem that Apocalypse had. Again, it's not as bad with this film, but it still does have that problem, and I do think it does hurt it overall. Also, the villains in this movie are really not good at all. I thought Apocalypse was a very one-note villain. That's nothing compared to Jessica Chastain's character. Vogue is absolutely nothing. All Vogue is she's someone that is here to get Jean to, sort of manipulate her into channeling her darkness, get her to do things that she definitely wouldn't do, get things to do things that are a little bit more violent than we would expect her to do, and they do a good job with that, but as a villain, she leaves a lot to be desired. There's really not much to her at all. She wants this power, that's it. She wants a power, and she wants to use this power so she can become, like, almighty and things. I honestly don't know. It's a very, very one-note villain. It's probably one of the most basic villains I think I've seen in any superhero film in a very long time, and I just was not impressed by her at all. Also, her introduction is really awkward. I don't want to get into it because of spoilers, but the way that they introduce her character, I thought was very weird, and I did not like the way that turned out at all. Also, while I do think there is some good character interplay, there is some really bad and cheesy dialogue in here. The one line, especially, that you've seen in that clip, where Mystique talks about, oh, you should change our name from X-Men to X-Women. There are lines like that in here. It's not the whole movie. There are actually moments that have some really good conversational scenes, and I thought, okay, that's actually really good dialogue, but there are moments where the dialogue is a bit cringy, and it just didn't really work overall. So again, the screenplay is very much a mixed bag. There are things that work here, there are things that don't. It's just all very messy in that sense. The cinematography, though, I do think is a lot better here. It does not look nearly as cheap as you're expecting. There are some shots that really don't look that great, but there are some that do look really good. The train sequence in particular is really well done. I mean, they go all out when it comes to this train sequence. You really do get to see a lot of these characters' powers in full display. They do a very good job with that. It honestly was a lot more violent than I was expecting, too. They kind of went far when it came to the violence here, which I definitely was impressed by, and I thought that the cinematography, for the most part, was really good here, and we're getting inside Jean's head. I mean, they do a good job with that overall. So I thought the cinematography was pretty good. Let me just say, though, one of the best things about this movie, I think anyone's going to agree with, is the score. Hans Zimmer's score is fantastic here. Now, you do not hear the typical X-Men music because, like I said, this is a far darker film. It's not like the other X-Men films that have come before it. It's trying to be something a lot more darker, and because of that, you have a much different score. But the score that they used, I thought was honestly really great. I really like what Hans Zimmer did here, and I really enjoyed the score quite a lot. That's definitely something that did impress me here. I thought it was a very, very good score, and honestly, it's a score that's better than the movie is asking for it to be, and similar to the acting, the score honestly does elevate and heighten a lot of the scenes. There are scenes that they shouldn't feel this epic, but because of the score, you feel a little bit more. Like, again, it's nothing amazing, but the score itself, I think, is fantastic. I really do love the score here a lot. And the editing, that's another problem I have with this movie. It's way too short. It really is. I mean, as much as I enjoy that first act, it does feel quite rushed. It really doesn't feel like we delved as headfirst into these conflicts as we should. A lot of characters also feel very much pushed to the background. It does not really feel like they have as much to do as they should. And just in general, I feel like you need to add an extra 20 to 30 minutes to this movie to really make it feel complete, because while I do think they did an okay job with, you know, establishing Jean's past and things like that, there's still a lot more they could have gotten into that I feel like was kind of wasted potential here. But like I said, overall, in terms of this being the final Fox X-Men film, I feel like you could do a lot worse. It definitely could have been worse for sure. It definitely could have been better. It does not feel like a final film very much at all. Really, just the final scene, I would say, is the only scene that feels like, okay, yeah, this is the final film. Up till then, it just feels like another entry in this series, and that is disappointing. Obviously, that's not really their fault. That's something that they kind of had to, that's kind of working against them and they can't really control. And it does definitely make you wish that they could have done more with this series, because like I said, I do think this could have been a very effective film. I do think that this could have been a film that was something legitimately great, but we just needed more time to delve into it. We needed another film to fully explore who Jean Grey was. We needed another film to explore some of the developments here, and unfortunately, they just didn't do that. So again, while this definitely was not the train wreck that I was expecting it to be, I still can't say I enjoyed this film because there's just too much that is holding it back from being legitimately good. There were moments where I thought, okay, maybe this could be a good movie, but just at the end of the day, it ends on the most, I think, average way possible. It is a very average X-Men film. There are things that are good about it for sure, but there's just not enough in there. So unfortunately, because of that, I am going to give Dark Phoenix overall a C+. Look, moving forward, I don't know what Disney is planning to do. I hope that they get more like secondary characters and things like that. If they want to do Dark Phoenix again, that would be cool because this definitely is not the best we could do of this storyline for sure. But again, I mean, I have enjoyed the majority of these films for sure, and it definitely is going to be sad to say goodbye to them. But we're moving forward. Obviously, you know, this is the end of the Fox X-Men films, and I am excited to see what Disney and MCU do end up doing with these characters in the future. But either way, guys, in my review of Dark Phoenix, some of you guys saw this movie overall. Look for your thoughts on it. Did you think this was a satisfying conclusion? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Where would this rank in terms of the X-Men films overall? We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.